And when we look across demographic groups, I feel like it's certainly easier for some groups to participate in trials than it is for others. Um, to be able to get to a clinic, to have reliable transportation, to be able to pay the costs associated with that, parking and gas and so forth. Uh, uh, it just seems like it's not very fair across groups where some can overcome those hurdles and some can't. But one of the things we saw this year with COVID was a lot of trials suddenly becoming virtual, where we can have a greater ability to allow patients to participate in trials from their homes instead of making a trip to the clinic. That just seems like something to me that could do a lot towards allowing more diverse patients to participate in trials. Do you see that? And do you think that's something that moving forward could help to change that a little bit?
Yeah, so I think this is incredibly important. At the same time, to pay attention to a few things. One is, do all communities and all parts of all communities have equal access to being online virtually? Right? So I happen to have a great FiOS connection from my home. It's high speed. I can do a televisit with my doctor. I could easily participate virtually in the clinical trial. Does everyone have that? I'm not, in fact, we know in the country that that's not true. A lot of participation in many online activities is still based on having a computer with a monitor sitting in front of you, and is mobile friendly. Does everybody, so for groups of people who may be disproportionately relying on cell phones, that, by the way, also includes a lot of our younger folks, many of whom don't bother with computers, from what I understand from my nephew. They really, if something is not mobile friendly, they're going to really run into a challenge there. And then you come back to the issue of trust. So I'm in a very unique position here in my organization, in that I arrived in April. So I have not met a single one of my staff members since getting here. Now, that's hard enough to build trust there, but I'm not talking about their healthcare. I'm not in a position of authority where I have some sort of disproportionate hold on information. There are no particular issues that I'm aware of in our organization historically with regard to race and ethnicity. So you're talking, if it's so hard for me to build trust in this circumstance, which has all the favorability going for it, how hard is it? I mean, I don't even know how comfortable I would be interacting with somebody about my healthcare who I'd never met before virtually. So I do think there are both issues of accessing the technology and how widespread that is, and how disproportionately concentrated that may be in accessibility for people who are white. And also the issue of building trust in a virtual environment, which is not trivial, and that's not trivial for anyone.
Yeah, that's a good point. I certainly don't consider myself to be rich by any means, but I do have a MacBook Air. I have an iPhone. I have an Apple Watch, and those things would help me out. Back in April, when I had a doctor's visit and they called me and said it's going to be virtual, I loaded the app onto my phone and was able to have a conversation that way. But once again, somebody who doesn't have access to that technology, it would be a bit more difficult. So I mentioned earlier about expenses that sometimes have to be paid out for clinical trials. Oftentimes, patients aren't given money ahead of time for that. Sometimes they're reimbursed, but the reimbursement can take a long time. That cost, I think, can be a barrier. Do you believe pharma companies are doing enough to help patients overcome those cost issues? I think we all know that site payments are a big issue in the industry. Are patient payments an issue as well? And can we be doing more to overcome that?
Well, quite honestly, we can always be doing more to overcome the challenges that patients face in enrolling in clinical trials, from simply finding the trials in the first place and learning about them, to how much we pay patients for their time, to do we make it possible for patients to travel, to receive their drugs, to how easy do we make it? It's one thing to simply pay for it. It's another thing if, as a patient participating in a clinical trial, you have to spend your time making the travel arrangements. So I know there are some organizations out there that partner with drug sponsors, that partner with CROs to help reduce those barriers, because those barriers to participating are pretty significant. Ed, may I address a question that's come in the Q&A?
Yes, absolutely.
First of all, I'll thank Eric Claver, I hope I'm pronouncing your name correctly, for reminding me that the Tuskegee experiment ended in 1972. I'm going to put ended in air quotes here, because like I said, these were people's fathers and people's grandfathers, and those people are alive today and get healthcare today, and are people who sponsors may want to participate in their clinical trials today. Laura sent in a question that I really appreciate. It says, certainly in Canada, we are confronting that mistrust doesn't just come from historical bad experiences. It comes from bad experiences with the healthcare system today for underserved populations. What do you feel can move the bar to gaining trust through better serving underserved populations? Well, for me, I think when I think about a question like that, I start to think about the difference between a population and a person. Because the only way to build trust is with individuals. Now, there are many avenues to reaching individuals. The public health community, for example, has long known that if you need a health message to reach out to the African American community, barbershops are an excellent way to reach African American men in particular, disproportionately good way. And we've seen that repeatedly on a number of health issues, not so much on clinical trials that I'm aware of, but various other work that has been done more on getting the word out about public health. So it's about building trust is with individuals, right? The question is, when you have to reach whole populations, what are the avenues you have to build that trust and to have those conversations? And that's about meeting people where they are. That's not about saying, hey, I'm the organization, I'm sitting here, you come to me. And I think it takes a healthy dose of humility and vulnerability on the part of the organizations and the people who are asked to lead those conversations. Or Cassandra can comment on this far better than I can. But, if somebody has cause to mistrust me, the only way I can build that trust is in a genuine two-way dialogue where I'm willing to say, I did something wrong. Maybe I didn't know it at the time. Maybe I did, but I did somebody wrong, or somebody else, preceding me in this role did wrong. So I do think, Laura, I thank you for the question, because mistrust is, partly embedded when we talk about better underserved populations. The question itself almost embeds a piece of the problem in it, right? It's thinking about a group of people rather than thinking about how do you build trust person by person with key opinion leaders? How do you give them genuine cause to trust and to feel and understand that change is really possible in engaging with you all? There's also another question about whether or not I feel the trust issue is different in the US versus in Europe. And I'll be very honest with you, while I have colleagues who could comment on that, I am not qualified to do so.